Good morning, Year 7. How are you all today? My name is Surbhi Arora. You may call me Miss Arora. Today, we are going to study the difference between atom, elements, and compounds. Have you ever come across these terms before during your science lessons? Can you recall? Mm-hmm. Maybe year 6 science lessons? Hmm? Okay, let's explore it together in today's class. Let's move on to the next slide. Today, we are going to explore the following learning objectives. After the completion of this lesson, you should be able to explain what an atom is. You should be able to explain that elements are made up of one type of atoms. You should be able to explain the difference between elements and compounds while using the terms atoms and molecules. And finally, you should be able to state the difference between atoms, elements, and compounds. Okay, are we clear? Let's move ahead. Now, as a starter activity, you can see on the board that there are 3 labeled boxes. In each square, you will draw the arrangement of particles in the 3 states of matter. Yes, solid, liquid, and gas. Once you are done with activity 1, you will write the properties of states of matter below them. Okay, now you all have 5 minutes to complete this activity in your book, and your time starts now. Here you go. Okay, I hope you all have completed. Let's move on to the next slide to check our answers. Okay, so how many of you got all the 3 arrangement of particles correct? Can you please raise your hand? Okay, that's nice. I can see a lot of you could recall. That's very good. Okay, and let's very quickly revise through the properties of matter. So for solid, the arrangement of particles is very close, whereas for liquid, it's quite close. And for gas, they are very far apart. Yes, you can see they are tightly arranged, liquids are loosely arranged, and for gas, they are very loosely arranged. Similarly, based on the arrangement of particles, the movement is also restricted. Yes, in solids, they can vibrate around a fixed position. In liquids, they can move around each other, whereas in a gas, they can move around in all the directions. And based on that, the energy of these particles in solids are very low. In liquids, they are somewhat higher than the solids, whereas in gas particles, they have the highest energy because of their loose arrangement of particles. Okay, are we clear with this? Okay, let's move on now to the topic of today, atoms. So, what are we all made up of? Yeah, what are the coins in your pockets that you're carrying made up of? What about the gold bars that you see in the shop, or the jewelry that you're wearing, or the bracelets that you're wearing, or the pens, the metallic pens that you have? These are all substances made up of atoms. Humans are made up of atoms. The coins are made up of one single type of atoms, which are copper atoms, or some kind of an alloy of some metals. Similarly, the gold bar is all made up of gold atoms. In fact, everything is made of atoms. Well, atoms are tiny particles that are too small to see with our naked eye or even with a microscope. Can you imagine if people were a size of an atom? The entire population of the world would fit into a box about many times smaller than a millimeter across. Can you imagine? Oh my god, atoms are so tiny. Hence, we can define an atom as the smallest particle of any matter. Now, if we look at the image, in the copper jug, the copper is an element and all the atoms are made up of copper. Similarly, coal is all carbon and hence made up of carbon atoms only. Similarly, the helium balloons is filled with helium gas, is made up of helium atoms. By the way, do you know why helium gas balloons rise up in the air? Anyone? Yes, absolutely correct. Helium atoms are lighter than air. That is why the balloons tend to rise. Let's move on to the next slide. Elements. An element is a pure substance that is made from only one type of atom. Everything in the universe contains the atoms of one or more elements. The atoms in one element are all same as each other, but they are different from the atoms of any other element. Can you understand this? Okay, let's look at this image again. Copper atoms are different from carbon, which is different from helium, and they all have their individual properties. Because of having these individual properties, they are all different. Okay, let's move on. Now, this large chart that you see in front of you is called the periodic table of the elements, as you can see in the heading. Did you know who designed it? Anyone? Okay, you may find it out and let me know in the next class. Well, there are about 118 elements listed on the periodic table. Since each element has its different properties, the arrangement of elements in the periodic table is based on those individual properties. It looks so complicated, but once you study the periodic table, everything makes sense. Well, you will study this in much detail in the upcoming years and specifically when you will be in your GCSEs. Okay, let's move ahead. Next is compounds. When atoms of two or more elements bond together, they make a compound. These clusters of strongly bonded atoms are called molecules. See how they are represented by two circles of different size and color that are joined together. Please have a look at this image. Here you can see, can you see? Yeah, here you can see that there are two hydrogen atoms bonded with one oxygen atom. And this is a diagrammatic representation of the same thing. Hence, in a water molecule, there are two hydrogen atoms bonded to one oxygen atom in the ratio of 2:1. Let's move ahead. Similarly, here you can see the same thing. In one molecule of water, there are two hydrogen atoms and one oxygen atom. Particle diagrams can also show the ratio of atoms of each element in a compound, which in turn can tell us the formula. So the formula of water is very good, H2O. Similarly, can you tell me the formula of these compounds in the image? Here we have carbon dioxide. Yes, so it has one carbon atom bonded with two oxygen atoms. So the formula becomes CO and 2. Good. Next, ammonia. Yes. N, H, and 3. And then you have methane, CH4. Very good. Now, having looked at what are atoms, what are elements, what are compounds, now there is a new term that we will read, which is molecules. A molecule is a word we use to represent the simplest unit of a compound. If you look at this image, water is a compound of hydrogen and oxygen, and the chemical formula is H2O. Can you see this image? The one which has many water molecules? Yeah. Now, this means that the molecules contain hydrogen and oxygen atoms in the ratio of 1 is to 2, which we have seen in the previous slides also. So these blue balls that you see, blue circles are the oxygen atoms, and all these little tiny structures attached to the blue structures are the hydrogen atoms. Okay, so all these water molecules, they together make up the compound water. Okay, now there is a slightly different case. Sometimes many molecules are made up of same type of atoms. For example, please have a look at this image. Here, there are two hydrogen atoms bonded together to form an H2 molecule. In the second image, there are two oxygen atoms bonded together to form oxygen molecules. Similarly, there are two chlorine atoms that bond together to form a chlorine molecule. Now, in all these molecules, two atoms are strongly bonded together to form the molecule. Okay, there is a strong bond in between them. Okay, now that we have come to the end of this topic, let us recap to see if we can understand all the learning objectives we read at the beginning of the class. Can you all understand that atoms are the building blocks of all matter? Atoms are the smallest particle of an element. An element is a pure substance which is made from only one type of atom. Atoms are different elements and can combine. When the atoms from different elements combine, the molecules can also be called a compound. Molecules are made when two or more atoms chemically bond together. Okay, now before we end the class, let's test ourselves. There are 5 images that you can see. Decide what these images suggest, whether it's an element or a compound. You have 3 minutes to finish this activity in your book. Okay. You may check your answers here. In the next class, we will learn how to write the chemical symbols and formula for elements and compounds. Thank you, children. Till then, see you in the next class.